Good afternoon, Frank.
Hello, Professor Spooner.
It's been a while, but a lot has happened, and in fact, seems as though more happens every day.
Yes.
Since yesterday, there were events that threatening two centers of government,
Hmm.
one of which seems to have learned from experience to be somewhat better protected than the last time there was a threat, and the other was old-fashioned enough not to have too much security, which is interesting.
Yeah.
However, apart from Ebola, of course, which I understand, even though Nigeria seems to have managed to control it and to be safe from it, nevertheless, it's still very dangerous internationally from the other West African countries. Apart from that, the most amazing thing that I think we have to talk about is the number of people from America and Europe, young people, who are being found on their way to join the forces of the Islamic State.
Yes.
Uh,
And these are not, if I may interrupt, these are not typically people who you would think they should be.
no, I heard that the girls that were apprehended by the FBI in Germany
Hmm.
um, had a very good school record and were modeled, well, I don't know whether model, but certainly thought to be very good students and not known to have any problems at all.
Hmm.
Even though apparently the gunman in Ottawa was seemed to be looking for something and to have some sense of interest in the Islamic State. But so it's all sorts of people, but particularly young people. And that's what I find interesting. Um, and so far as I know, nobody has suggested any serious explanation of it. There's a lot of surprise, and more so, I think, in Europe than here. But then the numbers are greater in Europe. Here, the numbers appear now to be well over 100, and from places like Denver and Minnesota, not just New York and big cities like Los Angeles or something like that. So,
Hmm.
um,
Well, but
it,
you must have an opinion on this. I mean, I can surmise that there's quite an attraction to such an absolutist black and white kind of philosophy, um, to some young people who seem so, at times, as do adults, confused with the onslaught of modernity, to be able to see something that seems to be pure, to see something that seems to be, arguably, for the forces of the higher power, it can present an attraction, I would suspect.
well, I think you're on the right track, and that's the way I'm thinking. But I'm also very interested to see how it's being accepted by the people who are reporting it, because I think that's part of the general picture. If this had happened 20 years ago, would it have got more attention?
Hmm.
Would it have generated more surprise than it does now? I think it probably would. People are ready, much more ready for amazing things, new things like this to happen now than they used to be. I think that it is. I wouldn't say. I don't. I'd call it the onslaught of modernity, since modernity gets used in so many ways, that it's used to mean not just what's going on today, but what's been going on for a long time. And I think
Hmm.
this has to do with what's going on currently. But I think it's the process that began. I think of it as beginning at the middle of the last century, of where population growth and population movement and the mixing of people from different parts of the world with different cultural backgrounds, different experience, different senses of where they fitted into the society that they were a part of. that all began to grow, expand. And so we ceased to be able to increase the rules that we had been increasing up until that point for where everybody should fit into society. And people ceased to be willing to live the way they had been introduced into the society. And look, there began to be much more of a sense of freedom for people to choose what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was always said before that in America, a paper boy can become president. And though it wasn't directly compared to England, the Americans said of England that you're born into a class situation and you're stuck there. You can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And obviously, both were an exaggeration.
Right.
I don't think very many paper boys actually became president. But the sense that you can negotiate your position has been increasing since the middle of the last century. But now I think that the negotiability of everything has led to confusion, and people aren't quite sure where they stand or what they can do, and people need order. And if the society doesn't provide order for them, they look around for ways to create order. And the way they create order used to be by selecting from their the data that was the information that came to them through their senses, whether it was something they looked for themselves or that just bombarded their senses from day-to-day life. They selected what fitted patterns, and the patterns made the data make sense to them. But when things are changing faster and faster, the patterns don't work anymore, except when they become stories. Mm-hmm. People look for stories to interpret things, and the Islamic State provides a story which is more. I mean, it's highly selective, but it seems to work because it's being successful.
Yeah.
So that's the way I see it, and I think that it's just a transient phase, because I think that the Islamic State can't last. I don't think that they have the ability to succeed in a particular part of Syria and Iraq, but I think that they have great difficulty spreading beyond the area that they've spread through now, simply mm-hmm. because where they are now, they're supported by a significant part of the population that they've taken over.
Right.
And that won't be possible for very much. It won't allow them to go very much further. So I think, I mean, my own feeling is that Obama is doing what he's doing to satisfy his critics in this country, but he needn't have done it. He could have maintained, it would have been a risk, but he could have bargained on maintaining his president who doesn't go to war image that he wanted to have to begin with. And simply let the people on the ground there, especially the Turks, come to terms with it, instead of letting them get out of it and use it as a way of getting at the Kurds again.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that the Turkish situation is convoluted by their feelings toward the Kurds, who are natural enemies of the Islamic State.
The Turks have the most efficient and most powerful army, right?
Oh,
there.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
And they're NATO members.
Yeah, I mean, they could take care of the whole issue in 48 hours if they wanted to. It's interesting when you were talking about what you just went through about order and how it provides an attraction to some people who are looking at disorder and feeling apart. I mean, I was thinking of several things. First of all, I was thinking there are very few 20 or 22-year-old people that I know, and I know you're a father as well. There are very few 20 or 22 people that I know who don't have those feelings from time to time of being quite apart from where I fit in, or how do I fit in, etc. So in some respects, if they're unmoored, they can be prey for messages like that. And then the second thing I thought of is, and again, you do see these stories still from time to time of young people in faraway places in Africa or in India or in Malaysia who become naturalized American citizens who talk excitedly about the realization of a dream to come to this country, to study in this country. And I guess I'm just wondering, the West as a whole is sort of falling down on the message. If people like ISIS operating from the deserts of eastern Syria can put something compelling enough together that actually instigating people to get on planes and fly over there, I mean, what are we doing or not doing? It's
And of
dismaying.
course, it wouldn't have been possible without social media.
Correct.
That's the other thing that must be borne in mind all the time, and not much has been said about that at all. So it's an amazing combination of new facilities and new conditions in the current decade that's making it possible.
I must say this. I don't know if you saw this, but speaking of social media, I'm not a particular fan of Mark Zuckerberg, but apparently in Beijing yesterday, he spoke in 30 minutes to a group of Chinese university students in Chinese. It was intelligible, difficult accent, but they loved it. He's been taking Mandarin lessons, and I got to take my hat off to the guy.
I hadn't heard that. That's amazing.
I should say, he's married to a Chinese American,
Uh-huh.
so he's also taking classes, intensive classes apparently, and he was proficient enough to speak for 30 minutes, and he made himself understood, and he understood questions, and very impressive.
30 minutes is...
30 minutes is a long time to speak in a foreign language that believe me, he was probably drained after that. You have to concentrate completely on everything.
I hope that is a sign of something else that's happening under globalization, and whether other people with his sort of position in the modern global economy will take a hint.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah. In the reinsurance world, very few people speak. Well, I shouldn't say that. The German reinsurance companies, those people all speak English. And the French, there's one big French reinsurance company, SCOR, SCOR, they speak English as well. But very, very few of the American companies or the British companies speak any language other than English.
Well, I think that Europe runs on English pretty much, the European Union. English, even though there are a lot of different versions of English, and one version isn't always fully intelligible to other versions, nevertheless, it certainly is a global language, much more than Chinese is, even though, of course, the number of native speakers is much less than Chinese. No, the global language situation, I think, is also in a transitional phase. It's going to change a lot in the coming decades, I think.
What do you think, just as a throw-in question at the end, what is the prognosis for Mr. Assad in Syria nowadays?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it's not being discussed very much.
No.
What you see in the media all the time is the fact that we're supporting some of our enemies and not others, not
Right.
the others, and that it's very difficult for us to choose what our contribution should be. But he's hanging on, and he's I think, using the current situation in a very intelligent way. In fact, for an ophthalmologist, I think he's doing very well. I wonder who his advisors are.
I don't know. He's certainly a chip off the old block, isn't he? He's as wily as his father was.
Yeah.
Because the interesting thing, of course, is if there was no discontent or civil strife in Syria, this whole ISIS thing would be much more muted.
Well, yes. I wonder, another thing that puzzles me, both because I don't really understand what's happening and because I don't understand why there's not more of it in the media, is Egypt. We hear almost nothing about what's going on in Egypt.
That's true. We don't hear much.
And everybody, the general opinion by those among those people who do say something about it seems to be that it's just gone back to what it was before. I don't believe that. I don't think that's possible.
No, I don't think so either. You think back to those oceans of people in Tahrir Square. I mean, where are they all now? Are they back at school, back at work? I mean,
Yeah.
the people like that don't just disappear. That's a very good question. I wonder what is going on.
So I think that since our time is up, the way to finish this is to make the point that this is not just something new in the Middle East, and it's not just a signal of general malaise in Western society, but it has something to do with globalization because of the amount of interaction between what's going on in the Middle East and what's going on here, which is closer than it's ever been before. And it's going to be very interesting to watch how it plays out, especially in the next month, because in the next month there has to be news about the relationship between America and Iran, and that's certainly very relevant to everything else.
Well, we can focus on that. But all right, very good, Professor. We'll
See you
talk
next week.
next week. Thank you.
Cheers.